Hey everyone, it's Andre Luck here to share my video for this week where I'm going to talk about being an introverted sales manager within sports. So last week got a lot of great feedback on the first video of just being an introvert in sports sales. A lot of feedback from both introverts, extroverts, so appreciate that. But this week I want to dive deeper into those aspiring to get into leadership. And if you are an introvert, there may be some things in your own head that are maybe holding you back. So I'll talk through challenges I went through, how I overcame those different misconceptions I had to fight. And then at the end of the day, what it takes to be successful as an introvert, as a sales manager. So you've probably heard things like you need to be more outgoing. We need someone who's more dynamic, or maybe you're too quiet to be a leader. If you hear those, don't let those discourage you. Those are just, for me, preconceived conditions that people have and notions have about, all right, this is what it looks like to be a sales leader within sports. And a lot of times the misconception is that if you're loud and if you're outgoing and you're banging the desk, like you're going to be a great leader. And like those are traits that can motivate and inspire people. I think it's more short term. I think it's more the substance and the consistency that you bring as a leader. But we'll talk through that. But for me, I definitely have experienced that, me being a little bit more introspective, reserved at times, thoughtful, quiet. I've lost opportunities from there. I know that, going for different roles or, being considered for certain things, I've been told that we're looking for someone who's a little more dynamic. And there's definitely validity to that. If that's the type of person that you need, personality that you need for the role, I would always challenge back, or at least moving forward, I challenge back and really think through that. Like, is that what we're conditioned to believe, that that's what equates success as a sales leader? Or is it, hey, we have some people who maybe are a little more reserved already in leadership and we need someone who's more dynamic to pull that out of them? So just assessing and not just defaulting to this is what leadership looks like, is something I think is a big misconception. But early in my career, I was told, like, hey, if you're looking to get into leadership, like you got to know when to turn it on sometimes and others. And I'll touch on that in a little bit. But early on, leaders would tell me, be aware of that. Like in certain settings and certain environments that you're in, that may not be the preference of people. And you want to exude confidence and you want them to have confidence in you. So, for me, I learned sometimes about the presence and your demeanor versus the actual substance that you bring to the table. Like you could be bringing results, but if people don't feel that or get that sense that they have a good grasp on things, like those are things you need to be aware of. So at times that led to questions on my effectiveness as a leader. And, does he have a good grasp on things? Like, does he care at times? But I think more importantly, it's aligning with people that, respect that unique quality about you, that you potentially offset the current dynamic, what's in the current structure or leadership team, and you bring a different perspective. Because if you have too many people, I've been in rooms where there's too many extroverts, outgoing, dynamic people who are all trying to fight for words. Like you can be that reasoning voice within the room. So just assessing that and thinking through that. But those are misconceptions that I've seen within sports sales, and just leadership in general as it relates to, how do you quantify the success or determine what you think the success of someone who's a little more introspective is going to be. So where are we strong? Where do we thrive as introverts within sports sales? For me, and I've seen for others, it's like that one-to-one small group coaching. In one-to-one sessions, I always had lines outside my door of people waiting to talk to me because, those are my moments to really connect and tap into, more thoughtful conversations. And sometimes they'd carry over because, I'd ask questions, I'd really be listening and learning. But in those small group settings, I could connect more. I could read different body language, and that's where my message, coming genuinely from the heart, could probably land better than in a large group setting. It also, for me, I led with where we thrive is leading with thoughtfulness and strategy, a calm presence in sports and in sales. Like you have a lot of outgoing people and there's a lot of people running around doing things, and there's always a fire to put out. There's always something there's panic. And I think for me, just that calm within the storm and the craziness that's going on definitely helped me, and I think helped my staff know that, all right, there's always going to be that consistent calm demeanor that I'm going to get out of Andre. So I think that's one area that we really thrive, and we create this safety and consistency that people can get used to. I also touched on it earlier, speaking from the heart. So because we're not just going to say a bunch of words just to hear ourselves speak, like when we speak, we need to make sure it's impactful. And so not getting out of our heads. Because a lot of times we'll think about, well, what is it I'm going to say? And even for some of these videos, I think like, all right, make sure I have everything prepared. I got my notes in front of me, everything like that. But sometimes it's better to just be raw and just speak from the heart. Forget how it lands necessarily, but really just thinking through, what's the message you're trying to get across, who you're trying to connect with, and, speak from that standpoint. One of the things we also thrive in is we can sense and pick up on nonverbals because we're not trying to talk and be seen. A lot of times we're observing, we pick up on things. We pick up on friction within on the sales floor. We pick up on certain nonverbal cues. Like I would, one year I think it was a director, I had my office, and every time someone would walk into the office, they would walk by my office first to get to their desk. So every morning I would just see how they walked. Like, did they walk slow? Were their shoulders shrugged? Did they like pop in and say hi? Like that was kind of my way to read, like, all right, where are people at today? And I could pick up on those things because over enough time and consistently seeing people walk by, what their normal demeanor is. And if not, I was like, all right, I'm gonna make a mental note of that. If that keeps up a couple of days, like I'm gonna bring the person in and make sure everything's okay. So the fact that we are observing and seeing things going on, like we can pick up on a lot of things. I would joke with a lot of my staff, like, you don't say much, but you really know what's going on. I'm like, yeah, I'm paying attention to everything. I don't always say that, but I'm observant. I'm aware of everything that's going on there. So over time, the team learned to understand me. That was my style. That was my approach. And you start to find people that resonate with that. So I talked about where we thrive, where we struggle. Big high energy meetings like sales kickoffs, monthly type meetings to get everyone together and kind of the rah rah, like that wasn't authentic to me. And I think if I had tried to, my staff would be like, all right, what's this dude talking about? So for me, those are areas I had to be intentional. I had to be aware that, all right, in this setting, maybe this isn't where I'm going to take the scene. Maybe this isn't where I'm going to thrive, but being aware of that and knowing when to turn it up a little bit and when to turn it on, like those are things that are important. Where we struggle too is matching other extroverts' energy. One, it drains us to do that, but two, we feel like we have to keep up and kind of compete a little bit and like, all right, they're bringing a lot of energy, I need to as well. Like that's not going to come off authentically as us and to ourselves. So, just being aware of that. I mentioned it earlier, but the visibility you give off as a leader, especially as like a director, senior director, vice president, or even higher within your organization, like the visibility that you have with your executives, because you're not out there always telling everything that's going on. Like you kind of let the work speak for yourself sometimes. But part of, I hate saying playing the game, but the politics that come with being in leadership sometimes is, you need to give off the presence that things are good and things are happening, and if someone's not going to be there every single day and like watch what's going on, you need to be able to deliver and present in certain settings. So those are areas where we typically struggle, and we got to be aware of that. Being assertive, being, some people just naturally direct. For us, like although it may be genuine, authentic, like are we assertive enough that people understand when we're serious and when we mean business? So being assertive in certain situations, and not just being reserved and defaulting to this is how we deliver a message. Like sometimes you do have to crank it up a notch. And then for me, sometimes when I was probably a more young, immature manager, I would take that energy that people would have just naturally as almost like critique. It was probably some of my own insecurities coming out and like sensitivity, just me personally. But a lot of times that caused friction for me because I didn't understand like this is how I receive information and why are they coming at me, where that's just the way they react. They want people to respond back to them like that. They like the friction, and that's just how they deliver a message. And I had to learn that's actually stretching me and growing me. And as I look back, a lot of the leaders I worked for where maybe there was an initial rub, that was the balance that I need to pull more out of me. So early on, I struggled of understanding people that are extroverted, that are strong, assertive, dominant personalities at times, understanding what that energy really meant and that wasn't to hurt me or to critique me. That's just the way that they operate. So how I focused on overcoming some of those things. Um, like I said, I knew when I had to turn it on. It's funny, my wife will go to chamber events and she's the full on extrovert, but I know in those settings, like all right, it's usually an hour, hour and a half. Like I can dial it up a little bit in some of those settings and situations. So I'm the one who's kind of working the room, talking to people, really more asking questions. I'm not really sharing too much, but when you're a good listener, people are like, oh wow, like he's really engaged and he's listening, he's in tune, like he's engaged with everything that's going on. So I know in certain situations, a sales presentation, a sales meeting, a chamber event, a networking event, like those are opportunities where I have to turn it up. If I stay in that mode too long, then eventually that's going to drain me, and that's not going to be authentic to me. But in spurts, I know when to turn it on and when I can turn it off and shut it down a little bit. Um, for me, I try to let the results speak for themselves and the consistency. So I was never going to put on a front like, everything's good and like, put this energy out there. If it wasn't, I just tried to let the results speak for themselves. Um, when necessary, I gave the stage to the extroverts on my team. I knew one, they wanted the mic, they wanted to be in front, they wanted to speak, and I was good with that. And a lot of times, like, with younger leaders, this was a good opportunity for them to learn to give a message and take on leadership responsibilities. But if this wasn't the setting for me to be out front, like then you give that to someone who wants the mic, who's dying to get words out. So I would be strategic about the teams that I built and having people that offset some of my challenges, my opportunities for growth, and gave them the opportunity when it was to speak up, or we needed something that was a little more rah, more motivating. Like I focused on that. For me also, give myself time to recover. Understanding that if I've been in back-to-back meetings, or I probably need to take a step back and focus on recharging the battery a little bit. And the last thing I'd say is that I really focused on leaning into my strengths. So being prepared, being a good listener, strategic thinking, like those are things that I really focused and leaned on because I knew those were my strengths. So to offset and overcome maybe some of the challenges, those are things that I really focused on. Now, as an introverted manager, you're going to have different personalities, and the first one I want to touch on is managing other introverts, and that'll be the topic of my next video. So I'll hit this at a high level, but we should relate well because they have similar personalities. But as I look back, I probably had some more friction at times with them because we are so similar. So the things that probably I frustrated people in my personality probably frustrated me because I expected something different from them. But until I really understood, like, oh, that's their personality just like it is mine. Here's where they thrive. So coaching them privately, giving them space to do their job, and let them come to you when they need to. Don't assume that because they're quiet that they're disengaged. So those are things when you're managing other introverts. When managing extroverts, you got to try and match their energy. I touched on that earlier. So even if it's unauthentic to you, like that's what they thrive on. They thrive on other people being excited, giving them public recognition. Be patient with them. Let them talk. Like they're going to talk a lot, and let them get it out. Don't get frustrated with them because they are different than you, and like don't let that different personality rub you the wrong way, because I've seen that where introverts can get turned off by other extroverts because they're always in their face. They're always out there and they're outgoing and they're loud, like, but that's where they thrive, just like where we thrive in other settings too. And then for the ambiverts, they kind of flex between both. I think it's really getting to understand and know them and their personality, and like where do they recharge, where do they get what do they appreciate, public recognition, private recognition, because in different settings and different situations, it may depend on what their personality type is, because they have a little bit of both, and they do well in both settings. So to close it out, I think the biggest takeaway for me, and that I would give advice to anyone else who's an introvert in sports sales or just a sales manager that's a little more introverted, is lead like yourself. Don't try and be someone else. I had some amazing leaders that I learned from early in my career, and I tried to be like them, but they weren't like me. They were different personalities. They were high energy. And when I tried to be that, like I got in my own head at times, and also, started comparing myself. So know your strengths, find people, leaders that are going to appreciate that, find the reps that are going to thrive in a setting like that for you, and find people that are going to offset your personality, and be okay with that, because it's not always going to be there's going to be friction at times because you have different types of personalities, but sometimes that's good. You can level some people out that maybe need to be dialed back a little bit, and they can pull more out of you and push you and stretch you out of your comfort zone if you have some people that offset your personality type. But over time, you'll find those right people. And if you can look at it from a mature perspective of, yes, there's going to be differences and there's going to be times I'm going to be made uncomfortable, but this is where I'm growing, you're going to have a lot of success. So appreciate you always as tuning in. I'll be back next week. Again, a video talking more about managing introverts, and I touched on that at a high level, but diving into that and like, how do you get the most out of, if you have an introvert on your team, whether you're an introverted manager or extroverted manager, how do you get the most out of them? So I appreciate you tuning in as always, and I'll be back next week with another video.